Good morning. I'm glad that you all managed to find your way here. We are here today to celebrate the reissuing of this book about Bernard Revel. I'll say a wee bit more about the author in a few moments. At this point, I will say that the book is dedicated to, I quote, the past and current presidents of Yeshiva University, Bernard Revel, Samuel Belkin, Norman Lamb, and Richard M. Joel. This is a distinguished and illustrious quartet. And I begin the morning by saying that I'm pleased to introduce the fourth member of that quartet.
Thank you. Today I think I'm the basso profundo member of the quartet. You'll forgive my voice, but I've just been filled these last weeks with singing Shira v'Hoda'ah, and it's gotten to my voice. But it's a particular privilege to be here, one that I would not miss, Birshus Harav. First of all, I want to thank, and I'm always thanking, Nikki and Morty Katz for their sponsorship of this and so much else. Morty, you know, is vice chair of the board of trustees of the university, and Nikki is an extremely active leader and very active on the Stern board, and a student at Revel. So that's very important. And frankly, it's been their impetus as much or more than anyone else that has been the leadership nudge for the revival and the blossoming of the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies into what Chaim Soloveitchik told me this week was the foremost graduate school of Jewish thought in the country. So everything's subject to change. And for that, by the way, I have to give much credit to Professor Arthur Hyman and his incredibly youthful successor, Professor David Berger, along with Rabbi Mordechai Cohen, for frankly taking a school that always had excellence and saying, is excellence enough for this? Shouldn't it be a force in the community? And as it's a force in the community, to me, as the fourth president, I look at this and say, so this is the kiyum for Dr. Revel. It's not just that there's a school that bears his name, names are easy, but that a school that embodies what he represents, which in fact is taking its rightful place and producing the kind of intellectual, academic, and B'nai Torah stars for the world that it's doing, is truly L'zecher Nishmaso. How wonderful to be gathered with you today through the efforts of the Revel Graduate School, which frankly is having a much more aggressive attempt to bring its story to our population, and also with the help of the Center for the Jewish Future for what is a momentous occasion. You've lived long enough that your appearance is momentous. It's particularly special for me, excuse me, as a friend and admirer, and I'd like to say student of Rav Aaron Rakeffet, to celebrate his life and his accomplishments. On a very personal note, this event holds importance to me for a special reason. It's through Rabbi Rakeffet's chapters and appendices that I saw that 80 years ago, there was a vision, as articulated by my revered predecessor, Dr. Dov Revel, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, for the aspirational and inspirational idea of a Torah-informed university at the heart of what would be a Torah Ummada community. When I saw a vision of a Jewish people deeply grounded in Torah while engaged in the world, taking seriously a responsibility to contribute to the commonweal in unique and wonderful ways. For me, it represents a kind of bonding, a cosmic bonding with the person whose work made my job possible. In his own words, at a commencement address at Yeshiva College, I believe in 1933, he said the following: "In the grave moral crisis facing civilization, whence is to come salvation? The institutions of light and learning, the cathedrals of faith and vision, the homes of the wisdom and the culture of the ages, are in their very being, in their essential impetus, the keepers of the conscience of mankind, the custodians of the free spirit of man. They are the first line of defense of mankind in the long struggle on behalf of human freedom, of the dignity and sanctity of unfettered personality. And that was from the president of Yeshiva in 1933. And so for me, I take great joy in seeing this master work on Rabbi Dr. Revel being reissued in a partnership between the YU Press and the OU Press, not merely for the sake of its fascinating historical content, but for the role that it plays in preserving the prose of a movement, the poetry of a contemporary Orthodox dream. Thank you to all the supporters and stakeholders like yourselves. Thanks to our precious students and our esteemed faculty and Rabbeim. The dream is as alive and relevant as ever. And sitting in Jerusalem, we have a Rav and a scholar who make sure that he keeps our feet to the fire to preserve, enshrine that legacy, and move it forward. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce one other person who will welcome you here. In this case, on behalf of the OU and its press, which was responsible for issuing this book, which is obviously of very great relevance to our school. The OU Press reissued this with the support of Mordechai and Monique Katz, who have already been acknowledged by President Joel, and probably would not want me to keep repeating their praises. But I've just been told that it's perfectly all right to do that. The trouble is that we only have about an hour or so for this event, which makes it very difficult for me to start engaging in such praises. The activities of Mordechai Katz really are essential, critically important, immensely, overwhelmingly critical to the success of the Bernard Revel Graduate School, and I think I will stop here. Rabbi Simon Posner is a central figure in the OU Press, and I'd like to acknowledge his presence. But I would like to introduce a person who is A, Talmid Chacham, B, a communal rabbi of influence and importance, with political influence as well as religious influence, and the leader for many years of one of the most important Orthodox Jewish institutions across the globe, namely the OU Kashrut Division. You all know Rabbi Menachem Genack, and I'm honored to introduce him.
I remember Joe Lieberman once being introduced. This can relate to Nikki and Morty. And usually when you introduce Joe Lieberman, you begin with, for the man who needs no introduction. And then he said, I once was with Henry Kissinger, and he was introduced, very briefly, because this is the man who needs no introduction. And Kissinger said, it's true I need no introduction, but I'd like an introduction. So I think we have to once again reiterate about Morty and Nikki Katz, who are, to paraphrase Benjamin Rush, who was one of the signers of the Constitution. He said they are devoted, speaking at the time about Thomas Jefferson, devoted workers in the vineyards of freedom, and I would add Torah education. Morty and Nikki, of course I know them well because they live in Englewood. You don't know a couple more focused on Jewish education, and do it not only in terms of their beneficence, but also in terms of thinking about education and the Jewish community. So this is just one of many of their endeavors. The OU Press is really proud to have been co-publishers in both of these books that were just jointly published, The Silver Era and also the book about Dov Revel, Bernard Revel. I remember just a few anecdotes and reminiscence. I remember must have been 1969, when Rabbi Rothkoff, before he was reinvented as Rabbi Rakeffet, the Rav was, I even remember the occasion, the Rav was giving shiur, usually used to give shiur on the third floor in First Hall. He was giving in the main, right across from the Beis Medrash, room 101, in the main building. And Rabbi Rothkoff came after the shiur to bid the Rav goodbye. And he told him he was going to be leaving to Israel. I think if I'm not mistaken, you said that you were going to be working on a translation of Yerushalmi. Related to Yerushalmi.
I had a contract from Keter Publishing, the Encyclopedia Judaica, and I told Rabbi I was going to be a staff editor.
But wasn't it Yerushalmi?
Yerushalmi is Yerushalayim. That's where it was. But
I remember thinking at the time, but if he can't understand Yerushalmi, the Hebrew, what's the English translation going to help? But now there is indeed the article put out.
Today you have.
And what struck me at the time, which I of course learned more about in subsequent years, was first of all, the loyalty and devotion of the Talmud coming to bid farewell and to take leave of his Rabbi, the Rav, and the reciprocal concern or love that I could see at that moment. Those reciprocal feelings. I just wanted to read. These are two companion books that were published simultaneously, and it's interesting the interplay between them about Rabbi Revel and Rabbi Silva. Rabbi Silva was an extraordinary figure, like Dov Revel, in American history at that time. And Rabbi Rakeffet records in his book about Rabbi Silva a letter that Rabbi Silva wrote on June 10th, 1930, to Dr. Revel. And he says, "I am doubly thankful to you for all the beneficial guidance which my sons gained within the walls of your Beis Medrash, the sacred yeshiva. They are filled with the spirit of Torah and authentic Judaism. I will never forget all this was possible because of your influence and that of your house of study." Years later, when Dr. Revel, when Rabbi Silva invited Dr. Revel to his daughter's wedding, Rabbi Silva described the groom. He previously studied in our yeshiva, the Rabbi Isaac Al-Chanel Theological Seminary. I rejoice in him because the influence of the yeshiva still inspires him. I remember the day that Rabbi Silva died and the Rav was going to his levaya. He cut the shiur short. I remember walking him out, and I remember him telling me, he said that if the people who Rabbi Silva did a toiva to will be at this funeral, Cincinnati will be filled from one end to the next. But in fact, there was hardly anybody at the funeral, barely a minyan. And these great historical figures, sometimes over the course of time, and their contribution is forgotten. And that's part of what motivated Rabbi Rakeffet in writing his biography of Dr. Revel. He writes in his introduction to this new book that Bernie Lander, Dr. Lander, who was then the dean of Revel, had suggested to him this topic for his thesis, which ultimately became this book, because he was those who were Talmidim of his, I used to hear this from Bernie Lander and from Rabbi Bezdin. They subsequently, because of their devotion, named the Dov Revel Yeshiva after Dr. Revel. Great people can often be forgotten, and that which they contributed, they represent also a historical model for us. I remember the Rav saying at Rabbi Silva's Shloshim He said that when he first came to America, so he said when he was speaking for the Agudas HaRabbanim, so Rav Moshe told him, you don't have to worry about any of the Rabbanim here. The Einziger, the only one you have to worry about is Reb Leizer Silver. And the Rav loved him very much. As a matter of fact, at his daughter's wedding, when Tova was married to Rabbi Lichtenstein, she had expected that her father would be the Mesadik Dushin. She told me once that to her annoyance, Reb Leizer Silver showed up at the wedding. I presume he was invited, but they didn't expect him to come. And the Rav asked him to be the Mesadik Dushin. I think we should also acknowledge that this week, Rabbi Lichtenstein is receiving Pras Yisrael in Yerushalayim as this Tuesday. I learned from both in the book, but also before that from President Joel, that Rabbi Revel was a great student and admirer of Abraham Lincoln. So I got to like him even more. And Dr. Revel, who was known as the Perenna Eli, just another counterpoint, his father, who died when he was a child.
12 years old. He was 12 years old.
12 years old. Dr. Revel was famous, renowned in his youth as a tremendous Eloi. At the early age, 6 years old, he knew big parts of Shas by heart and was tested on Bava Kama, knowing many Blat by heart. He was tested by Reb Yitzchak Elchanan. And his father, who died when he was young, 12 years old, was buried next to Reb Yitzchak Elchanan. So we see all this serendipity and the relationships between these different people, these great people. Reb Dov Revel, the Perenna Eloi, his brilliance, his vision, his selflessness and devotion, he literally gave up his life for the yeshiva, shouldn't be forgotten, and inspires us in these, the most difficult of times.
Rabbi Genek, I haven't seen the Suva book. I want to make a Shechayanu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechayanu v'kiyimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. This is a revised edition. I challenge anyone to find the word I added, the word I changed, and the paragraph I added. And if anyone finds it, I'll tell you the reason why. But it's the first time I'm laying eyes. Revel was delivered to me at where I'm staying in the presidential suite of Yeshiva University. And this is the first time I hold in my hands the Suva Eretz of 4th edition of both. Yashakayach Gadol.
Rabbi Rakeffet is known to everybody who came here, I'm quite sure. And I'm tempted to say that he needs no introduction. However, I've learned that this is not a very good idea. And so I will provide one, but it will be of necessity truncated. Rabbi Rakeffet, I will begin with the fact that he received his doctorate from the Bernard Revel Graduate School. But I regret to say that I can't, maybe I shouldn't regret, that I can't put this at the top of the list of his achievements. He has a remarkable resume. He was a congregational rabbi in the United States in his early years. He was a student of the Rav, as you heard. He has written about the Rav, very important work about the Rav. He has written about the two rabbis whom you have just heard about, Rabbi Eliezer Silver and Rabbi Dr. Bernard Revel. He has taught for many, many years in a variety of centrally important Israeli educational institutions. He was a central player on the clandestine education of Soviet Jewry, which was a project that he engaged in for at least a decade under the auspices of the Mossad. He is a lecturer of enormous skill and talent who has shared his knowledge all over the world. There is a rabbinic term which is applied when the Mishnah or another Tanaitic text provides a list of things, and the Gemara maintains that something was left out. The term is Tana v'shier, and the Gemara invariably asks, "My shier, the high shier." What is it? What else did the Mishnah leave out that it should leave this out? And normally the Gemara provides one other example. In this case, I have to say about this introduction, Tana v'shier, and if someone asks me, what did you leave out? I would have to add not one example, but examples that would take at least as long as it took to list the ones that I included. And so it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce Rabbi Rakeffet.
First of all, I want to transform this room into my classroom in Yerushalayim. Can everyone hear me well? There's no echo? No meaning? It's hard to hear. Can the experts figure out how this can be worked out? Because I'm hearing an echo. Higher. Can you hear me now? Okay, see, Rabbi Richard Joel is an expert in many areas. It's a kitchen smicha. You can ask me later. I begin my lectures because they go on to yutorah.org. Today is Sunday, May 4th, 2014, and I want to say hello to my students in front of me and to all the thousands listening across the world. 45 years ago, and there's a picture in my 7th book where I'm leaving the main academic center, a Talmud who today is a very famous medical doctor is holding the door for me. And a few days later, we bought a boat, and with my wife and children, we sailed for Eretz Yisrael. About 2 weeks later, we arrive, and in the middle of the night, the Jewish agency transports us and many other families to an absorption center in Yerushalayim. What is a Merkaz Klita? What is an absorption center? You're leaving a different country. You're leaving a country where you spoke the language, where you knew how to use the bank, where you knew how to shop, where you knew how to use the bus, and you're coming into a totally different country. And the concept behind the Merkaz Klita was a halfway house, a chance to be with new immigrants, many of them Anglos, and Sadkaniyat came in and took us, my wife, shopping, taught us how to shop, how to look at the labels. Ulpanim gives you time to adjust, and sooner or later, you become a total Israeli. Why am I telling you this story? When I came to America at the turn of the last century in the early 1900s, I was a young kid from Kovna. What did I do in my early years? Ich hab gesitzt in a Beis Medrash in Kovna, ich hab gelernt like everyone else. My aunts and uncles were in America. I decided to go to America. And suddenly I was overwhelmed. I'm used to a life of learning and davening and ich red no Yiddish. I need a halfway house. And people advised me, go to Henry Street, afterwards Montgomery Street, afterwards East Broadway, and give it time, and can sitzen, and can let it in, and can davenin, and little by little you become an American. And the yeshiva, which began in 1896, Yeshiva B'Tzchal Hanan, a continuity of Yeshiva Eitz Chaim, which began in 1886. I should say Yitzchak Elchanan began in 1897. It was 11 years later. It was a halfway house. And in the early 1900s, and you can read all about this, the doctorate by Rabbi Dr. Gilbert Clapperman, should live and be well, was the early years of the yeshiva. I stood on his shoulders and I wrote on Rabbi Revel. I'm still waiting, and I mentioned this to the dean of Bernard Revel. We also go back many, many generations. I mentioned to the dean, you need someone to stand on my shoulders. It's time to have a scholarly work done on Reb Shmuel Belkin. He deserves it. But coming back, Rabbi Clapman describes the yeshiva fellows sitting and they're demanding, it's not enough to reden Yiddish. We want to learn English. We want a high school education. We want to go on to college. And there were actually strikes in the yeshiva, 1907 and 1908 and 1909. And it's very interesting. The rabbis, the Rosh Yeshiva, more or less agreed that we have to introduce Americanization into the yeshiva. But not the Balabatim. The Balabatim who gave the money said, we are giving money min soll sitzen and lernen. What do we need English for? I speak a good enough English to make money in America, and that's all that counts. You'll go out like us, you'll manufacture, you'll have stores. Dreht sich nicht a Kopf that you need a high school and you have to waste time. We're giving money that you should sit and learn. And it's interesting, it was the Balabatim who actually fought the idea of Americanization. But we have an expression, I quoted it, I gave 2 talks on Shabbat, one in Mount Sinai and one in Yeshiva. 2 talks that complemented each other, one on Tzva Haganah Yisrael and one on the religious situation in Eretz Yisrael today. And I quoted an aphorism of modern Hebrew, Ma shelo yaseh seichel yaseh hazman, u'ma shelo yaseh hazman yaseh seichel. Life is a process. I can't elaborate. I can show you the Rabbi actually said this. This is his drasha on Yosef Yechav. You can apply that aphorism to that drasha. By 1911, 1912, the Balabatim, the Rabbanim, and the students all were in agreement. We have to Americanize the yeshiva. All right? You want to Americanize the yeshiva? It's like a man says, this year I'm getting married. Beautiful. But you need the woman you're going to marry. They're going to Americanize the yeshiva, but they need the individual who can do it. And here you have a fairy tale story that's worthy of a full-length movie. Some of you know I brought a documentary on the Revel to the world. It's the only achievement in my life that I did single-handedly. Everyone mocked me and laughed at me. And every time I succeeded in getting funding, I was shut down. And then I had a miracle. It goes back to my wife's relationship with the Levovitz family. Her grandparents davened in Abe Levovitz's father's shul. And I have to say, you all have seen the documentary, The Lonely Man of Faith. So, you need the individual. Rabbi Revel's life is unreal. Rabbi Revel, his years, to put him into context, 1885, 1940, Rabbi Dr. Bernard or Dov Revel. You heard from Rabbi Genack, he was the Prene Eloi, his father died young, Etzich Gevalgit. I have to save time because the hour is late and I have a world that I want to say. So I'm not translating. If I speak 3 languages, none of them correctly, but nevertheless, I trust Yiddish and Hebrew will go by. So Rabbi Revel had sich gewalget in the shuls in Kovna. He was learning, he was an Eloi. He went to Telz for 6 months. He always had an affinity for Telz. And I'll let you in on a secret. That's why Rabbi Arnis became a Rosh Yeshiva here. Do you remember Rav Yosef Leib Arnis? Do you remember Rav Shmuel Eliezer Volk? They were Tilja. He offered Rav Mottel Katz and Rav Elia Meir Bloch, when they were stranded in America, Rabbi Revel wanted them to come to the yeshiva. All right, they went out to Cleveland. The rest is history. Spent 6 months in Telz. He couldn't. He was an Eloi. He was a bit on the wild side. He and Rabbi Silva both had that personality. They were constantly in motion. He went back to Covenant. Then he got involved with the movement that conquered the world 110 years ago, 120 years ago. Every Jewish boy, I once had a long talk with some people who lived then, and they told me it's like any kid growing up at your time who was not in Bnei Akiva did not have a youth. Any kid who was not in the Bund, what later becomes communism, Bolshevikism, and you got to remember, communism is very powerful. They have two people sitting here. I'm looking at them. One of them is worth $10 billion, and one of them is worth only $10,000. Is that right? These are two human beings. One goes to a doctor, has to wait in line for 10 hours to get an appointment. The other one, in a minute, gets an appointment. The communist system, beautiful in theory. In practice, let me tell you, as one, my wife and I spent much time in communist Russia. In practice, wow, couldn't get off the floor. But Revel was attracted. 1905, you can check the Bible, the book on Bernard Revel. I did a lot of research to verify what Mrs. Revel was telling me. He winds up in jail in Kovna. It was the revolution. Everyone was revolting against the Tsar. The Tsar cracked down, gets out of jail, and he says, to heck with it. On the boat, he already had half-brothers in the United States. As a matter of fact, Nelson Gluck, the president of Hebrew Union College, was Rabbi Revel's nephew. It was a half-brother's son. Rabbi Revel, he divorced his wife. He didn't want to give a get. What does he have to give a get? He's a Reformed Jew. Rabbi Revel pleaded with him to give a get. There shouldn't be mamzeret in the family. Rabbi Revel arrives in America just the way I arrived in America, and just the way I went to Yeshivas Reb Yitzchak Hanan on at that time, I think, or it was still on Henry Street. Rabbi Revel goes to the yeshiva, sits down and learns. And there was a rabbi in Philadelphia who used to come in once a week. He played a big role in the yeshiva. He was the most Americanized of the Europäische Rabbanim. I've been privileged to teach his descendants in Gris Kollel. Rav Dov Aryeh HaKohen Leventhal. He comes, a new student this year. No, darf man antappen, darf mit dem reden and lernen. By the way, I have to tell you, I'm a third-generation American, and I only owe my Yiddish to Sempo Sugihara, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Do you read me? 7th grade in Salanta. My Rebbe was Reb Gershon Yankelovich. He didn't know one word of English. 8th grade in Salanta, Reb Henich Fishman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I took Heshi, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, to his first baseball game. I told Reb Henich, Rebbe, I made your son into an American today. He saw Joe DiMaggio play center field. Reb Henich looked at me, had me angeguckt, but he had confidence in me, at least I wouldn't corrupt his son. Hab ich gedacht, Eis lernen, swim or sink. So Dovaye comes and he sees Rabbi Leventhal, sees Rabbi Revel, brings him to Philadelphia. You don't have to learn in a yeshiva anymore. It's America. Be my assistant. Get degrees. You know that Rabbi Leventhal's children became world famous. One was a judge. One was a conservative rabbi. Education. Rabbi Revel winds up Philadelphia, U of P, Masters, Dropsy opens, interested in Chachmat Yisrael. I'll talk about this on Wednesday, the difference, what we're talking about when we say Wissenschaft des Judentum. He gets the first PhD from Dropsy, which today is the Graduate School in Semitic Studies of the University of Pennsylvania, writing on Karitic literature and its relationship to the halacha. And now you need a shidduch. Reb Moshe Bick, who here remembers the name Reb Moshe Bick? Who here grew up in the Bronx? He was our posek in the Bronx, the East Bronx, B'nai Akiva. We went to Reb Moshe Bick every shiloh we had. When I learned in Lakewood, and they wanted to kill me and tar feather me because I defended Mizrahi. So Reb Moshe Bick's son defended me, said, I can say Eidut Nemanah, that Mizrahi in Ken Mizracha in the East Bronx, say Zayin Elech. And everything my father tells them they do. And Reb Moshe Bick was a graduate of this yeshiva. Don't forget that. So Reb Moshe Bick once told me with his angelic smile, remember his eyes twinkled, the shmeichel. So he tells me, you should know, the first shidduch done in America was Rabbi Revel and Sarah Travis. And wow, who was Sarah Travis? She was a girl growing up in Marietta, Ohio, a wealthy family in the oil business. Chabad, Lubavitch roots. And very frum. She went, there was no day school, just a yeshiva, just a public school. There were no yeshivot for girls, no day schools. Marietta, Ohio. But there was a Rav in Pittsburgh, Rabbi Binyamin Zivitz. He wrote on the Yerushalmi, by the way, a big Talmud Chacham. He knew Rabbi Leventhal, he knew Rabbi Revel, Philadelphia, and every few months he would go to Marietta, Ohio, paskening up the shilas that they had. And he made the shidduch between Bernard Revel and Chaya Sarah Travis, Susie Travis. That shidduch was successful. And the Travis family brought Bernard Revel into the oil business. He winds up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They go out to the oil fields 5 o'clock in the morning. And if you're here in the oil field business, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can't work by day, it's too hot. The day begins at 5, by 12 o'clock you're home, that's it. The rest of the day at Gesitz Gelernt, he wrote Chidushei Torah, and everyone in New York knew about this genius out in Oklahoma who's a big Talmud Chacham, who's a Yerei Shemayim, and has a PhD from Dropsy. And they pleaded with him, come to New York. And you have to understand, sometimes you get a challenge in life. I understand what that means. You get a challenge, it's like God is reaching out to you. You cannot say no. In 1915, Rabbi Revel relocated. He took no salary from the yeshiva until his family lost their money well into the 1920s, when Standard Oil used methods that would be illegal today to capture the oil petroleum market. No salary. The Travis family totally supported Rabbi Revel. Now he has to organize a high school. You today, look at me, big deal. There are high schools in New York and yeshiva high schools in Boston and in Cleveland and in Los Angeles and in Houston and in Dallas. Wherever Jews live today, there are high schools. You know what it meant to organize MTA, to convince the Board of Regents that it's a serious operation? Shelley Sapphire, that was his name at the time. Later you will recognize the name as Shelley Sapphire. Why he changes his name? Pick it up on one of a dummy in Jerusalem named Rakeffet gives lectures on Monday on the history of Torah in the United States these last 2 years. You'll pick it up on one of those lectures. It's not for now. But Rabbi Revel remains very loyal to Shelley Sapphire because he had a PhD from Columbia and he was able to move mountains And January 1916, the greatest yeshiva high school in the world, I'm a little prejudiced, but I'm a 1955 graduate, opens its doors, and the rest is history. But not only that, Rabbi Revel comes into the yeshiva, he now has a high school, and he looks around, and it's haphazard, desolatory. Man sitzt, man lernt das, man lernt dahin, man lernt daher. You want to get smicha, you go to a rabbi on the east side. Rabbi Shalom Yaffe gave smicha to many people studying at the REITs. Rabbi Revel reorganizes the yeshiva. Classes, curriculum, Rebbeim, Yoredeya. And in 1919, a red-letter day in the history of the United States, the 5 first musmachim get smicha from the yeshiva. But this is unique because these 5 musmachim didn't study Yoredeya in Europe. They studied on the east side. Organized, curriculum, results. And one of the 5 graduates is the first American-born musmach of Yeshivas, Rabbi Yitzchak Hachanan. We're sitting here in Washington Heights. Can anyone give me his name? His rabbinate was a few blocks from here. Saul B. Friedman. Young Israel of, what was it called? Washington Heights, I believe. I can be corrected if anyone here grew up in Washington Heights. Saul B. Friedman, lawyer. I believe he was born in Pittsburgh. I yet knew him. He was one of the 5 musmachim, and Rabbi Revel sang and danced with them. V'tar helibeinu li'avdecha be'emet. But my dear friends, we now come to the most important moment in the history of Torah in the United States. If your humble servant, since 1978, when the Gris Kollel began a formal program, and I'm proud to say I was appointed to the faculty by the students, not by New York, not by anyone but the students who said, what, you're going to be in this building and not teach us? So, without going into great detail, I had to teach something that no one else can teach. And I developed a concept of fusing traditional learning, Shas and Poskim, with salt and pepper of what I picked up in Bernard Revel Graduate School, a broader vision. And I began a course in the history of responsa literature, a course that I have not repeated a lecture until today. Last Sunday at this time, I was very deeply involved in a Reuven. This entire year I've devoted to why Jews kill each other over an Erev in Flatbush and Borough Park. Next year, those of you who sing God Save the Queen, I'll be devoting a year to why Jews kill each other over an Erev in Hendon and Golders Green. There are different reasons why, halachically. How does a little American kid, a third-generation bummy who used to see Joe DiMaggio play, wie kommt zu das? I can shayur him that he, Baruch Hashem. I don't go further. I don't want to speak about myself. You know what it goes back to? September 1st, 1922. President Joel, do you celebrate September 1st, 1922 in this yeshiva? If you don't, it is sinful. What happened on that day? Rabbi Revel was always upset. You check me out. Rabbi Revel was always upset that the Europeans looked at America, Nacha Yeshiva, was for Yeshiva, America? What the heck can come out of America? Well, what makes a yeshiva? I have news for you. Tells in Cleveland has a tremendous campus in a suburb, Wycliffe. Have you been there lately? Campus is empty. There are reasons why. How come? I spent the Shabbos here. I couldn't believe the crowds of students, the spirit, the singing. I pleaded with people, don't come to my share. I was washed out physically. I spoke in Har Sinai, and Rabbi Schnall, the wonderful young man, Rabbi Eitan Schnall, says at the luncheon, Rabbi Rakeffet will be giving a share. Everyone should come, and I got to say, no one should come. Go back and go to sleep. What are you, the Shena B'Shabbos Tanug? What a crowd. What an interaction between a Rebbe and Talmidim. But what makes a yeshiva? Faculty. You can have a place, beautiful, Waldorf Astoria, like the one that just opened in Yerushalayim. But if you don't have the faculty, this is a Litvische yeshiva. It's nicht Hasidisch. Hey, ich bin a Belze Chassid, I have to go to a Belze yeshiva, whether I like it or not. When ich bin a Gera Chassid, I go to Gera. I'm a Chabadnik, I go to one of Tomchei Tamimim. Although Chabad, Baruch Hashem, today is broadened, and I can tell you I saw Chabadnim all over the place under YU scene this past Shabbat. But a Litvische, you go where there's a Rebbe and you can gain something from him. And Rabbi Revel was determined to bring over someone from Europe who would come to America not to raise money, not to raise funds, not to be a schnorrer, not to give drashot, but to sit in East Broadway and give sheiurim. And he hit upon, and I write about him, some of you know it's my third and fourth books. The fifth and sixth are the Rav. The third and fourth are Rakeffet-Rothkoff, a collection of published writings. So I have some biographies there. One of them is on Reb Shlomo Palachek, the Meitche Te'ilui. The Meitche Te'ilui, the Talmud Muvhak of Reb Chaim Briska. The Chavrut of Rabbi Yehuda Leib Foyer of Holyoke, Massachusetts, who may very well be the greatest Talmud Chacham ever to live in the United States. The Rab used to shiver when he saw Rav Foyer. Reb Moshe Soloveitchik wouldn't paskin a shaila of difficulty without considering Rabbi Yehuda Leib. Reb Lezer Silva, who was a Baki Otzim, needed a source, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Foyer. And he brought the Meitcheta to America, and the Meitcheta caught on. And I quote to you, you can get the source out of Revel. You want to know who the Meitcheta was? The Yeshiva Rabbinic alumni held a convention. Reporters came from the Yiddish press. There were then 5-6 daily Yiddish newspapers in the United States, in New York. And the reporter couldn't believe it. A table was set with Kol Tuv Mitzrayim. This was the roaring 20s. Oh, the food glistened. And no one was at the table. And the reporter takes a look. In the corner is a middle-aged man with a patriarchal beard, with a hadrat panim. And 35 students are around him, leaning forward to catch every word. Only after an hour and 15 minutes, when the Meitcheta finished his pilpul, did the students take food. That was the Meitcheta. The reporter couldn't believe it. And once the Meitcheta came, of course, the Gemara says in Shabbos, Ein Mazal Yisrael, whatever that means, but on a simple literal interpretation, Kein Mazal hab mir nicht. He died in 1928 of osteomyelitis of the gum that is cured today with one shot of antibiotics. He was in mid-50s. Rabbi Revel was heartbroken. Reb Shimon Shkop, his old Rebbe from Telj, was in America. Reb Shimon came to the yeshiva for a year, and after Reb Shimon went back to Europe, he went after Reb Moshe Soloveitchik in December 1929. Reb Moshe Soloveitchik gave his first shir in the yeshiva, and in 1957, a little American wise aleck kid named Rakeffet-Rothkoff, who led petitions with Jerry Blau, Rabbi Blau, some of my other friends here. We demanded from Rabbi Belkin, we know more than all our rabbis. What chutzpah we had. We can only learn by the Rav. And the Rav had to start a college year. And could you imagine a little kid like me got on the 36 bus, traveled for 18 minutes, got off and walked 4 or 5 little blocks. I sat down. The Rav couldn't get in or get out without my standing up. The picture hangs in room 101. I couldn't believe it. I walked into 101, Chappen Reina Mincha. I see my picture on the wall. Wow. Okay, Rabbi Reichman came with me yesterday. I should identify everyone in the picture, which I was able to do. But that's how Torah came to America. That's how our vistas broadened. That's how we weren't satisfied just with 100 daf Gemara and a little Yoredeya. A little kid said, I want to be like the Meisheter. I want to be like Reb Shimon Shkop. I want to be like Reb Moshe Soloveitchik. I want to be like Mori Rebbe, Reb Yosef Hadov Halevi. But life marches on. And these same kids who were graduating Talmudical Academy were going to City College. Those that had money were going to Columbia. These kids were bright. They demanded a college education. They were at home in general studies. There was no conflict. It was a beautiful atmosphere. You can call it synthesis, or a term that Rakeffet developed in Jerusalem in his 22 years of lectures on the Rav and the Kollel in the Monday class, harmonious coexistence. I think the Rav would have agreed with my term. Look into volume 2 of the Rav, The World of Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, where I quote the Rav word by word how he describes this concept of yeshiva college. They were clamoring. And Rabbi Revel was a man of vision, and he announced a $5 million campaign. They bought up half of Washington Heights. It was farmland all the way down to the Harlem River, Lower Lane. I don't want to cause anyone aggravation, but we cried in Israel when once again yeshiva is selling off the very buildings, the very land. They sold it off in the 30s, and they had to sell it off again in the 2010s, which is a disgrace because there are enough wealthy Orthodox Jews that should rise and support this magnificent institution 100% plus. But life is life. The New York Times laughed at Rabbi Revel, $5 million. The Reform Press went crazy. These weeds of Eastern Europe, what are they, crazy? And 3 Jews got up. Harry Fischel, Nathan Lamport, Mendel Gottesman, $100,000 apiece. Afterwards, each one gave another $100,000, and Mendel Gottesman said, the yeshiva is my life. I will mortgage my life to support the yeshiva. And they raised in pledges, underline the word pledges, $3 million. And you know the results, the beautiful campus when Rav Yitzchak Halevi Herzog, chief rabbi of the state of Israel, visited America in the early 1940s. I write about this in the Sylvie era. And I write about this in a monograph on Rabbi Herzog, which is published in one of my 2 volumes of Rakeffet Aaron. And Rabbi Herzog is walking on Amsterdam Avenue, and they show him the main academic center. He breaks down and cries. He couldn't believe that there could be such a beautiful building dedicated to Torah Hashem Tamila. But Ein Mazal Yisrael, 1929, October, the stock market crash, the $3 million in pledges are not even worth the paper they are written on. And the last 11 years of Rabbi Revel's life, tremendous struggle. Reb Moshe Aaron Poleyev described to me how he came to visit Rabbi Revel in his house, and when Rabbi Revel took off his jacket, his shirt was torn. That's the level on which he lived. He was diffident to take a penny from the yeshiva. The dedication, indescribable. Kept the yeshiva together. There were strikes in the secular faculty, high school, college, not the yeshiva faculty. Reb Moshe Soloveitchik said, first of all, how are you allowed to strike? A Rebbe's not allowed to take a salary, right or wrong. I don't know. I get paid, I imagine, for setting up my room before I teach, for setting up the microphone. Fine. A Rebbe's not allowed to take a salary, right or wrong. There's so many tshuvot. I can't go into it halachically now, but ma'ani b'chinim afata b'chinim, right? It's an open Gemara. For Rav Moshe said, if we'll strike, Rabbi Revel will take senior students and they'll teach the classes. The students will like the senior students teaching better than the old-fashioned rebellion from Europe. We won't have jobs left. So they never struck. And then the Holocaust coming in, and poor Rabbi Revel, so many requests, non-quota immigrant visas, save us, spare us time, the pressures. No, my dear students, we're sitting here in Washington Heights. Of all the people Rabbi Revel saved, can you give me the name of the most prominent individual whose life was saved by Rabbi Revel's invitation to teach Bible at Yeshiva College? Rabbi Dr. Joseph Breuer. Right or wrong? Are there any Yekis here? Don't be ashamed to admit it, because I have 6 Yeki grandchildren, and when we start talking, you'll find out that we're related, interrelated. It's inevitable, because it's a very prominent German family. Rabbi Dr., it's a whole story, because I got a letter from Rabbi Dr. Jacob Breuer. I'll tell the story very briefly, because it hits home. And he corresponded to me. I'm doing my research, and in his letter, he maledicts Yeshiva University. My father, he owed his life, he admits it, but he did not approve then. He does not approve now of Yeshiva University. He's writing to me. All right. Little tension. I wrote back. I didn't let him slap me too hard, but we slapped each other. Do you know that I was privileged? Anyone here? God, you don't have to believe it. Check it out. Rabbi Jacob Breuer didn't marry. He finally retires. He marries his widowed cousin. He comes to Israel. He's a different person. He's so happy. And Max Wild, these are the top Yekers, takes him to hear me speak on Rav Hirsch. I give a talk on Rav Shinshofel Hirsch. At the end of the talk, you can check with Max Wild, because I don't even believe what I'm saying, but it happened. Rabbi Jacob Breuer runs up and kisses me, hugs me, and he says, Harav Rakeffet, I'm giving you money. I want you to buy tickets. I'm arranging for you to give this talk in Washington Heights, in Kehillat Adat Yeshurun. And without batting an eyelash, I say, one little problem. My life insurance is not paid up. He was hysterical, but you can understand what we're talking about. Rabbi Revel continued to teach. November of 1940, he had a stroke in the middle of teaching in the classroom, a shir on Choshen Mishpat. He died December 2nd, Beit Kislev, 1940. Fascinatingly enough, Reb Aaron Kotler's yahrzeit, Beit Kislev. Reb Moshe Aaron Poleyev's yahrzeit, Beit Kislev. So this briefly is Rabbi Revel's life, his achievement, his thinking, the nucleus of what Rabbi Belkin, and that's a lecture unto itself, the relationship between Rabbis Belkin and Revel. It develops into the magnificent institution that we are part of today in Gris Kolel in Yerushalayim. But I want to end off the lecture in a few minutes, and I apologize in advance. It's a Rabbi story, but it's true. And I already have a title. If I wanted to be a Rebbe, some of you know the title I have, you need a Chutz La'aretz city. You can't be the Jerusalem Rebbe, the Haifa Rebbe, but the Maplewood Rebbe, that sounds good. The problem is, I have Hasidim, but a Rebbe bin ich nicht. All right, you'll understand shortly. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart the three wonderful people who introduced me. Rabbi Ganak had a kashrut meeting, so he had to leave. I'm giving you all the titles. President Richard Joel and his wife. To me, they're the parents of three lovely students that I taught. And particularly Avery got me into a lot of trouble. He changed my life. I don't know how much you realize it, but I'm the only faculty member in Grus who lives in the building. I always tell people I do not work there, I live there. There's a big difference. Every day I spend 2 hours answering emails that come in from all over the world, people listening. It was Avery, my Talmud, Rabbi Avery Joel, my Talmud in the Kollel, who said, Rebbe, we should put your shirm on YU Torah. I didn't even know what a computer was, what a website was. Your Talmud asked me, I said, Gesundheit, do what you want. The rest is history. I want to thank Professor David Berger. You've been of help to my son-in-law as well. I can only tell you that that line, I wanted it toned down, but a father-in-law can't get away with it. But you notice when you mentioned it, he toned it down slightly. So I am very appreciative of your scholarship and your help and our relationship. Morty and Nikki Katz, I need not tell you, we go back a very long way. Nikki and Malka were classmates. I taught 2 of their children. And we're just good friends, a mutual admiration society. But there's one person here in the audience who, Gedalia Friedenberg, do I see him? I saw him earlier. And Rachma, I want you to know this is a student, a virtual student. And I'll be very honest, the Talmidim I teach in class are not mature enough to appreciate the Rebbe in his total configuration. Someone who's been through life, it's a different story. And I've picked up students from that website that are devoted beyond words. And this gentleman, wife, wonderful children in our institution here, he is the one who started the movement to republish Revel and Silva. And I thank him from the bottom of my heart. But now I want to conclude. In Washington to Washington, I devote about 4 or 5 chapters to the 10 years that Malka and I lived a double life. We were younger. I don't know how we did it physically. No one had any idea that we worked for Nativ, the branch of the Mossad that dealt with Russian Jewry. But you don't have to believe my book now. The Mossad came out with a book, B'Nativ Hadamama. And when Malka and I went to the book launch a few months ago, we fainted basically. Everyone jumped on us, Atem HaKol Chavim, and I have to tell you, I know what I did for the Mossad and what went on in Russia. To see that it's appreciated, this was beyond words. But I want to be honest with you. Before the Mossad contacted me, and I describe how they contacted me, it's both in the Mossad book they described my phone conversation, and in my book, Washington. They did a security check on me. How do I know they did a security check? Because I know what happened afterwards when Malka and I had sent over 200 people to Russia, what would happen from the time we would suggest someone to the time they could go, if they could go. Do you know that today I couldn't be involved? I would flunk the security check. And the reason is very simple. My eldest son-in-law was a career officer, went on to very high rank in the army. I don't want to go further. I'm a security risk because my son-in-law may have told me things, which inevitably he did. I remember one night, Malka and I recall, in the 80s, he took us out in the terrace 12 midnight, and he showed us night sight he was developing for Merkava 2 at the time. And he said, look into it, Abba. I look into it. The whole valley, we live with the view of the Valley of the Cross, pardon the expression. The whole valley became daylight. So I know something, willy-nilly. I'm a security risk. My dear friends, I describe in my volume Washington, and in the volume, and I will mention the volume, The Legacy of Bernard Lander. You have a similar description there. When Bernie Lander approached me, I was working on my doctorate, completing courses, and I go in. Pearl Cotton, the recorder of the graduate school, she ran the graduate school. Without her, Bernard Revel would not have survived, of course. Bernie Lander, was a professor, was a genius, but he was in 3 places at once. And she said to me, Arnold, you better go in and talk with Dr. Lander. I'm going to make an appointment. You've got to get a topic you have to start. I went in. I'm going to write on the Netziv. I gave a whole proposal. Many years later, a lady did that topic at Hebrew University, a daughter of Beitin. So Bernie says, Arnold, I like what you're saying, but I want to talk with you. I have to consult. We may have another project for you. 2 weeks later, I come in, and Bernie Lander says to me, my Rebbe has no monument. His children have not married. I want you to do my Rebbe's monument. And he assigns to me Bernard Revel, and he puts his hands on my shoulders, and he starts to cry. We reacted this in Yerushalayim, in the home of Toby and Herb Willick. We both cried. It's absolutely exactly what happened. Do you know that today I could not do a doctorate on Bernard Revel? And it all goes back 2-3 years ago. I'm walking in Geula on the way to my son-in-law's dental office in Haredi land. And as my wont in Geula, much to my wife's chagrin, I stop at every bookstore to see the latest. And right in Rehov Malachi, if you know that big bookstore, I take a look. Interesting book, Yasayas Runi, by Yitzchak Elchanan Gibraltar, a memoir of Kovna. Now, all the years my late mother, who lived to 98, died, it's 2 years ago now. My mother used to make a hakta chainik. Her mother's family, about they frum, as they upgehit, Kalvarsky, and she would tell me stories, but I'm an American kid. I saw my grandparents assimilating, that pair of grandparents. I always say I had 2 grandfathers, one who learned in Volozhin, and by the time I knew him, he went to Shul Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. My other Zayda, who barely knew anything, at gekent daven, and he knew how to daven, he was about tefillah, but at nicht gekent upteitchen the Wetter. My other Zayda never was Mechalel Shabbos all the myriad of years he was in the United States. So I didn't pay much attention. I start flipping the pages of the book. I see Rabbi Revel's picture. And then I take a look, Revel, Kalvarsky. I say, what's going on here? I bought the book immediately. I went through it in a few days' time, hundreds of pages. I couldn't believe what I'm reading. I called my colleague, my Talmud Chaver. We came in Aliyah. He was a kid. I was old. I helped him, a brilliant doctorate, Professor Shaul Stampfer of Hebrew University. His doctorate is on Volozhin, Telsh and Slabotka, a beautiful piece of work. I called him, and he knew. He said, call the author. The author was well into his 90s. I called him. I wrote him. We corresponded. We spoke. My dear friends, I want to tell you, two people descend, and they pronounce it in Kovna, the Kalvarisky family. One of the descendants is Rabbi Dr. Bernard Revel. Another descendant, you are listening to his voice at this very moment. If I am correct, Rabbi Revel's grandparents are my great-great-grandparents. I may be skipping a generation or two, maybe adding. I don't have the time to waste and trace it out. But Yitzhak Elchanan's Gibraltar, who was part of the family, knew my family, and all the stories my mother told me were true. And the Gebenkeit to Yiddishkeit, and the great-grandfather of mine, the architect who wouldn't build on Shabbos and wouldn't build a church, he certified all the stories. So it turns out, and if you have the Revel book, you'll see in the introduction that 48 years later, I learned that I built a monument for my own cousin. I deserve no credit whatsoever. How did Archie Bunker say it? All in the family. Let me end off, as I do in Yerushalayim. My dear students, thank you for honoring me with your presence. Until we meet again in health and happiness, das Vidanya.